we are returning to some of the worst victimization that we've seen in humanity, but we're bringing it back in the name of modernity and progress.
He's our son and he doesn't have a mother.
If I could scream it from the rooftop, I would. Our child has two dads and he does not have a mother.
If love makes a family for same-sex couples, that means we are going to require this child lose their mother or father to be in this family. Biological parents are the most invested in, connected to, and protective of kids. Mothers and fathers offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. The problem with defending children is it goes right to the heart of what I think is the ultimate god of the left, and that is sexual identity and sexual autonomy. Ladies, your career doesn't and probably shouldn't look just like a man's. If you can, get married early and have children first, and then you need to let your world get smaller, right? You should not be working to be partner in the law firm in your 20s or 30s. And the message that it needs to look just like a man's career, otherwise you're not equal, I think that has absolutely sabotaged women.
Welcome to my third conversation with Katy Faust. The first was in her hometown of Seattle, and we were talking about Them Before Us. That's now the name of her movement, but at that time it referred to a book that she and Stacey Manning had co-authored on why we need to respect our children and what they need, particularly when they're not able to voice it themselves or cast a vote on election day. The second conversation was in Washington when you just published a second book, Katy, and that was on how to raise, no, it wasn't actually, pro-child politics. And it's pretty remarkable to a former legislator because you're really proposing that every area of government policy should be assessed through the lens of the interests of our children in an old-fashioned way that actually suggests our children are our society's future. But leave all of that aside. You're in Sydney today. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Love the country. Love the people. Thanks for bringing the sunshine out for me. It's
in the
great.
middle of winter.
In the middle of winter. I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you should stay longer next time.
I know. We're squeezing a lot in.
Katy, you yourself have had quite a unique upbringing, and people could be surprised that you've taken the position you now take on the best interest of children. Tell us a bit about yourself for Australians who haven't tapped in yet to our American conversations.
Yes. First of all, I love being on your podcast and I love listening to your podcast. I was just recommending it to a young gentleman in Melbourne who's like, I follow a lot of US politics, but not a lot of Aussie politics. I'm like, John Anderson's the guy for you. Because you have such a diverse group of people. You talk about social issues, energy, national security. So I always learn a lot, and it's really great to be a guest again. Thank you for the three-peat. I'll take it. I totally never intended to do any of the things that I'm doing today. 15 years ago, I was just a stay-at-home mom, pastor's wife. We had just gotten home from China with our youngest child, adopting our youngest child. So I was not built for, maybe I have become built for kind of the culture war policy space, but did not intend to get in on this. Upbringing-wise, going farther back, grew up in Portland, Oregon. My parents were married until I was 10, and then kind of typical Gen Xer, parents divorced, which obviously, 80s and 90s kind of were the height of the divorce epidemic. Thank you, no-fault divorce for that. After that, my father dated and remarried. My mother repartnered with a woman, and they've been together ever since. So I'm very, very close to my mom and her partner. Actually, she's at home. She's at my house right now, hanging out with my kids that are there while I'm traveling. And just very, very grateful for her. She's obviously been in a long-term partnership with her partner that I love both of them so much. But I'm at the place, came to the place early on, and I'm still there, that when it comes to marriage and family, we have to promote the married heterosexual mother and father relationship for the sake of children and for the sake of society. So obviously there's a lot of intrigue and like, oh my gosh, how could you believe this? How could you adhere to a traditional family structure? Isn't that disrespectful to your mother? And so a lot of people will ask me, what does your mom think about what you're doing? Because if you Google me, there's an awful lot of content online talking about why marriage is a matter of justice for children, that children have a right to be known and loved by their mom and dad, and why same-sex parented families often leave children with a significant deficit. So people will say, how can you believe this if you love your mother so much? And the answer is, I love my mother so much. And that actually is one of the reasons why I believe this. Because if the progressive left, in terms of their ideas about family makeover or the redefinition of marriage, if they're right, then what they're saying is, my mother was optional in my life. Because the whole premise of redefining marriage and redefining family and same-sex headed households is that a child's own mother or father is optional to them. In my own life, that is the furthest thing from the truth. I needed my father and I needed my mother. I needed both of them before the divorce. I needed both of them after the divorce. I would not be the person I am today if my mother was not in my life, or if I had another mother. I would not be the person I am today if my father had completely abandoned me after the divorce. So, and it's interesting because even my mom and dad both recognized that the other parent was very, very important to me. They had a pretty amicable divorce. And so I was able to still have access to both parents. Obviously, they had new partners and romantic interests in their life, but thankfully I remained connected to both of them. So this idea that you can remake the family, you can redefine marriage, it has led to this idea that two men can raise a kid, two women can raise a kid, and the child suffers no ill effect. That's a mistake. Because that whole idea says, that means that two men could have replaced my mother. That's what the premise of gay marriage proposes, is that two men could have replaced my mom and it would have zero impact on my identity formation, my development, the safety and investment and connection that I had in my family. And it's not just statistically a lie, it's demonstrably a lie from my own life, right? I need my mother, I love my mother. She's still mothering me, she's at home. She texted me right before we started this. She's like, I cleaned out your brown paper bag cupboard where I just throw all the paper bags and all the plastic bags. And I know she opened it and she went, oh, I bet I could kind of put this together. I can sort out the things she doesn't want. I can organize it so that when she gets back, she has a usable closet here. I'm like, okay, the woman's still mothering me. And I needed it then, I need it now. And no random man off the street could ever be able to substitute for what she's given me.
My own experience was my sister and I lost our mother when she was only 12 months old or something, and I was just three, from undiagnosed bowel cancer. And so I grew up longing to know who she'd been. I think out of a sense of wanting that understanding of place, really, my story. It wasn't that others didn't step in. I wouldn't want to say that for a moment, any more than you would say. You've just said you loved both of the women who raised you. Mm-hmm. But there's an interesting aspect of it that I'd like your views on. No fault of my father's, but there wasn't a mother there for me to watch and learn from in terms of how a man should properly and respectfully treat the number one woman in his life. That role modelling seems to be incredibly important, but maybe particularly even more so from boys. They're maybe less cerebral on these things than girls.
Can I ask you a question? And maybe I know this, forgive me if you've told me before, but did your father remarry?
No, he didn't.
So did you ever feel sort of a hunger or a longing to be loved by a mom? Did you ever want a mom?
Oh, yes.
What was that like?
It was a very big black hole, something quite serious missing. Mm-hmm. Even though, as I say, there were plenty who stepped in. My grandmother had an aunt, we had nannies, we had all sorts of things. Great that Dad didn't foster me and my sister out.
Wow.
He kept us with him, didn't try and find someone else to, and I'm very thankful that he didn't. I can see that looking back, Right. But of course there was. And then there was that role model issue. It was another man, really, who I still revere, who drew me aside and said, let me give you some tips on the right way to respect and honour somebody that I know he could see I think you're interested in. That's not a criticism of my father, but it's to say there were two holes there.
Yeah.
You know, who was mum?
Yeah.
How do I understand myself properly? And the second one. So that's innocent in a sense, you know.
It's interesting because we have a couple studies. So you lost your mother to tragedy. And obviously it created a hole and a deficit in terms of that craving of maternal love. And it's interesting because the world of family redefinition, or the kind of the gay marriage world, would say, well, that doesn't matter, right? 2 men, 2 women, as long as children are safe and loved. But you are safe and loved. You had the love of your father, and yet you craved...
And those who looked after me, I have to say that.
Right, so you had this community, right, that was caring for you, but you still craved the love, the maternal love, right, the love of your mother. And so to me, it's like, it's so very clearly self-evident that this is what human children want, and we have to bury it. We have to bury that reality for the sake of advancing and validating adult identity and adult desires. And I'm not just talking about gay adults. I'm talking about heterosexual couples that want to have a casual divorce, right? Or heterosexual couples that want to use a sperm or egg donor to create a child in the name of treating fertility, or a single mother by choice or a single father by choice who want to create a child using reproductive technologies. And yet it's so obvious, like when you just look at the bare bones evidence of who children are and what they want to be loved by their mother, and they want to be loved by their father. And we have to do an awful lot of politicking and explanation to wish that away. So the other thing that's interesting is children used to lose their mothers or fathers by tragedy a lot more than they do now. We used to have generations of children that lost their fathers to war. We used to lose mothers much more routinely in childbirth. But the birth of modern warfare and modern medicine means that we don't lose mothers or fathers to tragedy as often. So you experienced that. There's less of that today. But what we do have is children losing their mother or father due to intentionality, because some adult wanted it that way, whether it was a mother or father who was unwilling to do the work of repairing a marriage, whether it's a same-sex couple that's intentionally creating a child to be motherless or fatherless. And there's a difference. There's actually a difference in how children go about being motherless and fatherless and the impact that it has on them long term. So you lost your parent to tragedy, to death. And we have a couple studies that show that children like you who lose a parent to death tend to fare better than children who lose their parent through divorce.
And I can tell you exactly why that is.
Why?
And I'll test it with you anyway.
Test it.
Because there was the grief and the sadness and the sense of loss and why can't I know my mum? But there was no suggestion that somewhere, she is a bit like a father dying in a war on the battlefield, that somewhere that parent's out there but doesn't care enough to be involved in my life.
That's exactly right. She would be there if she could.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I realised a long time ago, there's a fundamental difference in that.
There's a fundamental difference with, I lost my mother, but she loved me and she didn't want to go. And I lost my mother because she ran off with her boss and now she's started a new family and she lives in Florida, right? There's a difference there. The other difference is when you as a child looked back on the memory of your mother, who else remembered her fondly?
Well, my father.
Yeah. And probably
and my sister. But although she was so young when it happened.
But she could identify with you, and everybody in your world, the grandparents and the aunts and uncles would say, oh, John, she was so wonderful.
They did.
Yeah.
They've only just stopped because they're all passed on.
Right.
I lived with people telling me what my mother was like, which only deepened the longing. I wish I'd known it.
But they all joined you in your grief, right? They all joined you and validated your loss. Whereas when you look at a child who has lost a parent to divorce, very often they're the only ones that look back and say, I mourn what I didn't have, right? I wish that I was still living with my mother and my father. I wish my mom and dad were still married. I wish that she still lived in Wyoming and not in Florida. But if they voice that, a lot of the people around them, their own mom and dad, or the people around them might say, oh, you wouldn't want your parents to be unhappy, would you?
I was going to come to that.
Right. Or, oh, well, your mother has actually like found her true self now, or, oh, you're better off. I mean, do you remember how much they were fighting? And so a lot of times the child in the situation of divorce, or I would argue in the situation of a third-party reproduction, family structure, the child is very often isolated in their grief. There's nobody else that's validating them or joining them into it. They might be the only one that looks back fondly on the home that they used to have that is now gone. And so that is hard because you bore an incredible burden, but you didn't bear it alone. Children who lose their parent to intentionality, not tragedy, still have a burden. They're just very often isolated and trying to process it completely solo.
I was going to raise that issue because I went on someone else's podcast recently. We were talking about these sorts of issues. It was a slightly, probably more oriented towards today's cultural values, if you like, and a younger grouping than mine. And in discussing these issues, somebody on the commentary page said, "Oh no, not again! I'm tapping out right now." He's this old dude talking about, the need for children to have their parents. Surely you can see that the kid's going to be far better off with his parents separating if they're unhappy and arguing.
Yeah.
Actually, it has to be pretty bad before the child's better off, I understand from the studies.
Yeah. So obviously, parents that are in a high conflict marriage, where there is a high degree of stress, studies show that children do experience some measure of relief if the parents divorce in that situation. That is not to say that those kids are better off than children whose parents remained married and had a low conflict marriage. But sometimes there is some relief for kids in a high conflict marriage if their parents divorce. Obviously, the solution is create a low conflict marriage. The solution is both mother and father should do the work that it takes to go to therapy or go to counseling or have accountability so that the child does not have to deal with the split homes, with the split lives, and according to one study specifically, develop split personalities because things are so drastically different between mom's home and dad's home. But what's amazing to me is, right now we've got the rise of commercial surrogacy. It's banned in Australia. I say banned because, obviously there's ways around it. A lot of different Australians are going to go to various countries to try to bring children back into the country.
Yeah, I'm deeply troubled by that.
It's interesting. I read a lot about, I have like a Google alert on my phone, so I get all of the articles on surrogacy in a 24-hour period. And every now and then there'll be something about, oh, this poor Western Australian man who really wanted to be a father, but it's illegal here because of our draconian laws. So he had to go all the way to Thailand to get a child. And then he couldn't bring him back because the country prohibited it because it looked suspiciously like trafficking. But can you believe it? And all of this sympathy for this man that could not create a motherless child who's going to come home and not have a woman in the house. And we go, and really there's no studies that show that these children fare any differently. Well, that child is you. That child would be you growing up motherless with the same level of longing and desire to know your mother. But that child is going to have to grow up in a situation where the man that is raising them intentionally chose for their mother to be gone versus you, who was raised by a man who desperately wished that the mother was still there. So this idea, like, this old guy harping on about marriage and family and children. I'm sorry, but these are things that do not change. Just because you now have the technological ability to manufacture children into existence, traffic them across borders by trifurcating women into genetic mother, birth mother, and denying them a social mother, that's not permission for you to just wreck a child's life. Children mourn these kinds of things. We used to avoid them. We used to label mother loss as tragedy. Now we are creating mother loss in the name of progress.
That's a pretty profound thing to say. I've seen people in a long life now who've been so smothered with love that you wonder why they've never got their lives together. In part, what you're saying is kids need more than love. They need structure, they need boundaries, they need security, it's not just about love, is it? Because that was when we were having the same-sex marriage debate. It was an awful lot of stuff about all the child needs is love, as though that is all the child needs.
Well, especially in relation to the same-sex marriage debate, the love makes a family, right, line that is so popular. From a children's rights perspective, if children have a right to life and if children have a right to their mother and father, the idea that love makes a family functionally means child loss makes that family. A child has to lose something that they have a natural right to be in that family. So specifically with same-sex couples, that's what you're talking about. If love makes a family for same-sex couples, that means we are going to require this child lose their mother or father to be in this family. So to me, it's a very slick way of promoting and incentivizing some of the things that we know create, as you just demonstrated, a primal wound in the life of a child.
At that time, I was staggered by the amount of research papers and authorities and so forth who came out arguing neutrality at best, but very frequently that in fact
Even
better.
Better.
A surprising amount of it. Research is research, is it?
Yeah, the problem with the children with same-sex couples fare even better than kids raised by their heterosexual parents is that it flies in the face of everything else that we've already established up after decades of research on family structure. So prior to 2005, researchers were pretty much in agreement on the left and the right that children fared best in the home of their married biological mother and father in a low conflict marriage. That was kind of like the phrase that was repeated in terms of what we knew about who children were and how to provide the conditions that would lead to their flourishing. But then something strange happened in 2005, leading up until about 2015, is there was this glut of studies that kind of came on the market about how children fared no difference if they were raised by two mothers or two fathers. I was just on a podcast this morning with Josh Zepps, and we had a conversation about this. He pulled out a clipboard and he's like, let me just read through all the studies that show that same-sex parents, that there's no damage to children when they're raised by two moms or two dads. And he's like listing off like Psychology Today and this university and this study and all of that. And I'm like, oh yeah, tell me what else? And I said, there's very clearly all of these studies that if you want to say kids fare no different, there you go, there's your studies. And to his credit, he said, I know that some of these studies had some methodological problems, specifically that they used recruited samples, right? People that were invited into the study rather than examining population-based data or getting their participants at random. But it's beyond that. Those no difference studies, they were very small sample sizes. They often didn't have adequate controls. And here is what I think is the biggest problem. Most of those studies did not actually look at the outcomes for kids. They didn't look at their school records. They did not look at whether or not they were on welfare. They did not look at, they did not wait till the kids were old enough to ask, to answer for themselves, right?
Yeah.
It was just...
Surely you can't know until they're 30, 40, 50, 60.
It is hard. You have to find them out of the house. And then you have to find them at random. So it's hard to find, it's hard to do good studies on same-sex parented households because A, only 10% of same-sex couples are married, and then B, there's a small percentage of them that also have children, and C, you have to wait for the kids to grow up, and then D, you have to find them at random. It's hard to do these studies. And between 2005 and 2015, we didn't have time to wait for good studies. We had an agenda to push. We had an institution to redefine. We had a marital history and tradition that needed to be updated and modernized. And so you got all of these studies that are, I don't want to say junk science, but very few of those studies are going to be able to meaningfully tell us something about the population at large. Now, there are a few studies that did use the gold standard, and when they did evaluate children that they found at random using massive population samples, that asked the children themselves how they were doing or evaluated government data on actual outcomes, you find that no differences actually meant major differences, especially as it related to, especially as it related to challenges in school, high rates of depression, anxiety, daily fearfulness, daily crying. Paul Sullins did kind of the lion's share of the work on that. And so this should not be a surprise to us, because we already had a lot of information about what it would take to lead to child flourishing as it relates to family structure. So Josh and I also talked about how when you're not studying same-sex parenting, if you're looking at family structure and you're studying anything other than 2 moms or 2 dads, sociologists largely agree on 3 things. Number 1, biological parents are the most invested in, connected to, and protective of kids. Biological parents advantage children in ways that unrelated adults do not. Number 2, men and women are different. And those differences benefit children in the home. Men talk to children differently, play with kids differently, discipline them differently, and children benefit from that. Mothers nurture children in ways that fathers don't. They soothe children in ways that fathers don't. They emphasize equality and emotional regularity in ways that fathers don't. And those are things that those are just realities. Mothers and fathers offer distinct and complementary benefits to children. And then number 3, losing a parent is traumatizing to death, divorce, incarceration. Separate studies show that sperm and egg donation among heterosexual couples showed diminished outcomes with kids. So it's interesting because you've got these 3 truisms about family structure. Biology matters, gender matters, you shouldn't lose one or both of your biological parents. And then magically, when you study same-sex parenting, somehow none of that matters. Even though you're always missing a biological parent, you're always going to be missing mother or father. And you've always lost a parent due to some level of tragedy or on the open big fertility market. So right there, you probably should be looking askance at those studies that say that love makes a family and those kids fare no different, because it flies in the face of everything that we know about family structure.
I've touched on it already in my own, from my own experience. I certainly learned from my father that he had a total abhorrence of violence, even though he had been a real warrior during the Second World War. That, any finger laid on someone of the opposite sex in anger is wildly inappropriate. Mm-hmm. And we never stopped talking about domestic violence in Australia. Somehow it's always men's fault. I don't think it's as simple as that personally. Right. But the point I just wanted to draw out, though, was the one that I've alluded to. In many ways, he was a very good role model through no fault of his own. He couldn't model.
Sure.
Was not in a position to model.
Right.
Tenderness, commitment, patience, forbearance, all of those things that are critical to a marriage relationship. Are we running the risk that significant numbers of our young children will find it very difficult to understand how relationships work, and that in turn feeds a problem?
Yes.
I remember a wise old man when we were getting married saying, you'll be given any number of manuals on how to raise children, and there'll be this and there'll be that and all over the shop. He said, my advice is what your kids need to know is that mum and dad are together and they love each other and that they can't be divided.
Yes.
That's what he said.
Yep.
And we adopted that mantra with our own children. I'm not sure they think we necessarily did it very well, but we tried.
Let's all be real. John's children thinks that he did it very well. Get him on camera. I think they should be your next interview.
No, I'm not sure they'd agree.
So you're saying, do you think that there's a possibility that we might be wrecking the next generation because we're not doing this kind of modeling for them? The answer is yes.
So I think boys learn from modelling. I'm doing too much talking here.
No,
boys especially.
No.
My thinking would be they really look to models. They copy. So they copy a good dad or they copy a bad dad. If they're not there, they might copy the uncle or the cat thief next door. If there's no male to copy, well, they'll do what we know has happened in the inner city. We know the studies are there. Yeah. Inner city America, they'll join a gang.
You find somebody to follow. Yeah. Everybody's going to follow somebody. And the way that I talk about it, like the ARC, I wrote a research paper for ARC on family structure and talked a lot about you become what you behold. So whatever it is you're looking at, you're going to become like that. So if you have a family where there's a lot of fighting or a lot of control, you're watching your parents dealing with conflict in a way that's really unhealthy, your default is going to become like that in your own relationships. We can see it in children that are raised by single mothers. If you're raised by a single mother, you are much more likely to also become a single mother yourself. You're likely to create the problems that you saw as a child. If you were a child of divorce, you're 45% more likely to get divorced yourself when you grow up. So there is something about the family that we are raised in is going to be our default. That's not to say that any child is doomed to become a single mother who's raised by a single mother. That's not to say that if you are a product of divorce, that you are going to get divorced. But that is to say you're going to have additional challenges on the road ahead if you want to create another pathway, if you want to try to buck those trends. So what do? You have to behold something else. You have to watch somebody else live the way you want to live and pattern yourself after them. So my husband and I both are products of divorce, but we were both very committed to never divorcing, especially Ryan. I remember when we were dating, so my parents, my story sounds dramatic, but I don't actually feel like it is. Like, I still had a relationship with my dad after the divorce. I'm still very close to my mom. There was very low conflict in both of those homes, as like I did not ever, there wasn't conflict between their partners. Part of that is definitely probably some of the survival instinct as a child who understands these people have some level of control and influence over a parent that I want to stay connected to. So I'm going to kind of people please. So there probably was some of that in me, but it wasn't a high conflict situation. My husband's life was not like that. His parents had a high conflict marriage, and then they had a high conflict divorce. So again, this whole thing of like, well, isn't it better for parents to divorce so that the child's not living in a situation where it's toxic? And like, a lot of times it's just toxic and you're not together anymore. So that was his situation. He experienced so much pain from not just the divorce, but then the new manifestations of families and the conflict in those families and the instability and the complexity as their parents went on to create new family units, that when we were dating, I remember we were probably like 19, and we were just kind of Twitter-pated and in love and kind of not taking things too seriously. But I remember he like grabbed me by the shoulders and he looked at me and he said, I want to let you know that if we get married, we're never divorcing. We're never divorcing. My kids will never live through what I lived through. Do you understand? And should we keep dating? Because if you're not on board with this right now, this is over. And I was like, yeah, sure. Everything's going to be fine. We'll totally not get divorced. But then once you get married, you realize there's a very real danger that we're going to fall into the patterns that we watched as children because we beheld people who weren't able to stick it out or who created high conflict situations. So what is the solution? You have to behold something new. And thankfully, every church that we went to, there was a couple or two with healthy marriages who were really great parents, and they let us behold them. They let us kind of get into their life and watch them, and they coached us. And I really think that that's why we're at year 27 now with a pretty joyous marriage and 4 kids that we're really close to. It's because we got discipled in a whole new way of doing marriage and family.
A little, very brief story, if I may. We were told when our kids were young and went to school, they'd start to worry about divorce because they'd have kids around them who were going through trauma as their parents looked like they were going to split up or actually splitting up. So I used to quite frequently say, now, Mum and Dad want you to know that we are, whatever. And we're driving along one day with the kids. We have 4, the 2 older ones. As I started this little line, started to parrot with me. Mum and Dad want you to know that. So I stopped saying it. 8 or 9 years later, when they're in their late teens, they said, why did you stop doing that? And I said, well, because you told me that you wanted me to stop, that you knew we weren't going to. I said, oh, Dad, it wasn't as simple as that. We might have been joshing you off, but actually, of course, we were worried about it because so many of our kids were going through.
Yeah. They wanted that reassurance.
Even though they mocked me at the time for going once too often.
There is a level of security. It really is the foundation for kids. And the way we talk about it at Them Before Us, Stacy and I talked about it in the first interview that we did when you came to our house, my house in Seattle, that children need 3 sort of social emotional staples in their diet: mother's love, father's love, and stability. And marriage, that lifelong commitment, is what provides the stability. And so what your kids are saying is, give me the stability, give me the assurance that we're always going to have that stability. And it's not inconsequential for kids. It's critical. Like it literally is sort of the engine that allows them to flourish. It's the home base from which they can explore and then always come back safely. So that's really sweet. That's actually a really sweet story.
It's not as if you're out there championing free enterprise or capitalism or Trump or whatever, the things that would normally you'd expect draw the ire of the left. You're out there championing the weak, the marginalised, those who have no voice, our children in particular. What happened to the left that used to care about families so much?
Well, as Jordan Peterson talks about, that the left historically has been the party, has been the group that has championed the marginalized and the oppressed. And I think that they do still care about that, at least in name. The problem with defending children is it kind of goes right to the heart of what I think is the ultimate god of the left, and that is sexual identity and sexual autonomy. So if it's true that children have a right to life and they have a right to their mother and father, that means sexually, adults have to change. Or their identity is no longer the most important part of the equation when it comes to family building. If children have a fundamental right to be known and loved by their mom and dad, that means that adult self-interest must bow down to child interests. It means that adult rights, supposed rights, right to marry, right to parenthood, right to happiness, actually has to subject itself to genuine child rights. And so I think that the reason why there is such a violent reaction to saying things like children need, deserve, and have a right to their mother and father, therefore, you cannot get a casual divorce. Therefore, you cannot create a child on the open fertility market using somebody else's sperm or egg or womb. Therefore, you can't create a same-sex household if it means that children are going to lose their mother and father. So to me, this is the thing that confronts the highest value, to put in Jordan Peterson speak again, right? What is the highest value? What is the value that governs all your other values? On the left, I would say, it seems like that value is sexual autonomy. But if children actually have a right to life and a right to their mother and father, then that God has to fall. And now you're talking about, you're confronting somebody's religion. And people, I think, have a pretty irrational response when you challenge their religion.
There's a really interesting rejoinder to that, if people stop and think about it for a moment. Someone's made way for you when you were born. People have adjusted their whole life around you. They've made great sacrifices for you. And what's more, they'll have to do the same, and for most people, at the other end of their lives, when you're no longer able to look after yourselves. This idea of radical selfishness, that I will identify who I am, that I'll be God over my life, flies in the face, I suspect, of just about everything we know about truly finding a workable identity, which is that you don't centre it on yourself.
Well, and I would say you go back to what does it mean to be human? And what it means to be human is you're very vulnerable, like you said, at both kind of poles of the human existence, when you're very, very young and you're very, very old. And so we have to, I think, get the answer to what does it mean to be human correct. It's not in your utility. It's not in your ability. And we don't get to use other people because they are weak and vulnerable. We actually need to protect people when they are weak and vulnerable at both ends of the human experience. But if sexual identity is God, right, or if sexual freedom is our highest value, then what we see is, especially on the end of young children, then their vulnerability is going to be taken advantage of. So here, this is where you could say we really need a very solid Christian theology of what it means to be human, because we have these questions, in the world where I'm in, working around things like reproductive technologies, where we need a robust theology of what it means to be human so that we can say, who makes life? Who takes life? Do you get to screen people out of existence because genetically they have not, they haven't made the grade when we're grading embryos? Do we get to evaluate them based on 900 different characteristics and delete them from existence if it looks like they could develop baldness early on or whatever it is? I mean, now we have all of these different genetic screening services that will allow you to not design your own child, but just kill the ones that don't meet your specifications. So we have got all of these different areas where we are exploiting human vulnerability. And we've got to get very serious very quickly about understanding the human person, especially as it relates to where these humans need protection. I would say especially as it relates to the earliest stages of life, because we're getting to the place where we are returning to some of the worst kind of victimization that we've seen in humanity, but we're bringing it back, right, in the name of modernity and progress.
There's been endless work about the problems with men, written in anger or in sympathy. Men are the cause of all our ills. They've lost their way. They're toxic just because they're masculine. All sorts of issues arising out of that. A lot of focus on it. A lot of scorn too, to be honest, I think. How are women doing in the age of OnlyFans and an age when fertility is dropping quite rapidly, yet we do know in this country that most women would like to have children earlier and more children. And where, in fact, so many older, wiser women are now saying the story that we tell kids, girls, at their speech days, you can go out there, conquer the world and have it all, baby. How are women really doing, in your view?
Men and women both have their own distinct areas of challenge right now. And obviously, you've touched on some of the male struggle, and a lot of that is, obviously in the workforce, right? That we're moving in a direction where it's harder for men to find jobs where they can sustain a family. I guess you could say that a lot of the higher paying jobs are in fields that are a little more, that don't require the brute strength that men can bring to the table in terms of, the old school jobs of manufacturing or heavy labor or whatever. And so we are seeing men that are struggling in the workplace, especially lower educated men. And that's a really big problem. When men fail to get married and form families, and some of that is economically driven, men don't do well, right? You're seeing higher rates of mental health challenges in men, certainly higher rates of substance abuse that can lead to things like deaths of despair. A couple of years ago, we had the first time the life expectancy dropped in the United States slightly. And it was because of deaths of despair, right? You were seeing higher levels of men specifically succumbing to things like addiction or suicide. And so like men it really is not good for man to be alone. And unfortunately, through a lot of different factors, you do see more men who are alone. Women also struggling. Maybe not so much in the workplace. I mean, obviously they're overrepresented when it comes to, I think at this point, every level of bachelor's, master's, and graduate, PhDs, right? Women are outperforming men in education spaces. Career-wise, the sky is the limit. But you're also seeing women who are struggling to form families, or at least they're not prioritizing it soon enough. And then they get to the point where the biological clock isn't just ticking, it is reverberating in their brain so they can't think about anything else. But very often that comes a little bit too late, right? They bypassed the years when they were at peak fertility. They looked over a lot of the opportunities they had to get married when they were younger. And now they're in their early, mid, late 30s, maybe early 40s. And they're seeing that actually the opportunities that I had to be a wife and a mother, which now I realize is the only thing that I really want, I didn't capitalize on those opportunities. And, the male body is a little more forgiving. When it comes to fertility, the female body is not. You've got about 20 good years of statistically being able to work with your body to have a baby or several. And unfortunately, the career advice and just the messages that we're sending to young women very often leads them to squander those prime reproductive years in the name of pursuing career or self-fulfillment or paying off debt or traveling the world or finding yourself or whatever. And a lot of times women see too late.
I'm amazed. I usually prefer actual hard research and statistics, but anecdotally, I'm amazed at the number of girls I know, daughters often of friends, who haven't been able to start a family So they're talking about having eggs preserved and
Right.
what have you because they're so desperate to do it. It gives the lie to a lot of the rhetoric that's been flying around from what, can I call it phase 3 feminism?
Oh, yeah. Are we in phase 3 or 4 these days? It's really hard to keep track.
I don't know. I met a very aggro feminist the other day, and she was aggro.
What's aggro?
Aggressive.
Oh!
Extremely aggressive.
Yeah,
One of
sorry,
those
I
ones.
don't get your Australian,
Well, here's me thinking we'd imported it from the States.
aggro. Maybe it is. I mean, I guess that I'll discuss it over brekkie.
But she told me that she spent her entire life reading up on feminism, but had never heard the term phase 3 feminism.
Interesting. Yeah, women are, especially liberal women, are not doing well. You see the highest rates of mental illness among single liberal women. And it's because it's a philosophy that pits women against their own bodies and against their own children. I think that it's absolutely a situation that bifurcates, that really does create kind of a silo of your body is over here and your mind is over here, and it's not moving together in concert. Like, we are a body-soul unity, and feminism, honestly, I think, coaches women to reject their bodies, reject the natural realities, especially of their fertility, especially of their reproductive capacity, and certainly in terms of how they should connect and pursue relationships. In terms of career, we've been told, women have been told, you are not successful unless your career looks just like a man's career. When I speak to young people, I was just in Washington, D.C. before this, talking to 2 different groups of young people, conservative, Christians, on the whole. The message is, ladies, your career doesn't and probably shouldn't look just like a man's. Your career should be more flexible. It's probably going to peak. It's going to hit its zenith later on in life when you have children, which you should have young, if possible. Sometimes it's not an option. Sometimes you haven't found the right person. But if you can get married early and have children first, then you need to do that. And then you need to let your world get smaller, right? You should not be working to be partner in the law firm in your 20s or 30s. You allow yourself to let your career go for a little while, prioritize your children. And then you're going to find creative ways to keep your foot in the door when it comes to the work world. And then when your children are going off to school or they're a little bit older, then you can reemerge into the workforce and probably have a pretty successful career, but it's not going to look like your husband's, and that's okay. And the message that it needs to look just like a man's career, otherwise you're not equal, I think that has absolutely sabotaged women.
It's very interesting that the research, again, indicates very clearly that many women would like more choice. They would like greater flexibility. But this is a direct challenge to the very weak state and federal leadership we have in this country at the moment. We have a housing crisis, and it really is affecting family formation.
Yes.
And I actually have a lot of sympathy for young people on that issue. And that's the point of your book. You say government policy should be seen through the lens of how does this play out for our future, i.e. our children.
Yes. Yeah, definitely there's economic factors that make it very, very difficult. In the places where housing is more affordable, where people are able to get into a 3-bedroom home versus a 2-bedroom home, they are much more likely to have more children. But also, there are a lot of generations that have gone before us that had a lot less money, a lot less wealth, a lot smaller homes, and still had 4, 5, 6, 7 children. So I don't think it's predominantly an economic matter. It is predominantly a question of, what is the nature of man? What is the nature of woman? What is the purpose of life? What are the things that we value in life? And unfortunately, a lot of the messages that children are hearing, young adults are hearing, is that what matters in life is your career or your wealth or your freedom. And that's a pretty fulfilling message in your 20s and early 30s.
But it's not so later in life.
But it's not so when you're 40 or 50 or 60. There's a lot of, now that I am almost 50, I look at my life and I look at my friends who decided not to have children for environmental reasons or because they didn't want their freedom to be hampered, or it felt like it was going to be too expensive. And, there's only so many restaurants that you can visit. And there's only so many new yoga studios that you can attend. But you get to the point now where you're a middle-aged woman like me, where I'm looking at, I mean, there's endless joy and endless fun and endless delight in all of my children. You know, my oldest got married 6 months ago. So now I'm totally into like, oh my gosh, where are you going to move and what's your place going to be like? My 19-year-old is traveling with me here today and we're having so much fun. And it's incredible to have her be like, maybe someday I'll live abroad. And I really like this about Australia. And who really is better, Sydney or Melbourne? I mean, like we're like scrapping it out with everyone.
I couldn't possibly comment.
I know.
But we are in Sydney.
Yeah. But it's like, it's so fun to see her grow and discover the world with her. And then my boys, you know, they're going through challenges, you know, like, oh my gosh, you know, we got your golf clubs extended and now you just like took 10 strokes off of your best score. And like, you get to discover this with all of your kids and my life is so filled with joy and excitement and surprise and meaning. And there was a sacrifice that went into that. You know, when my friends who were childless in their late 20s and early 30s, you know, when they were traveling the world and succeeding in their career. And I was at home wearing secondhand clothes and like going to all of the different discount supermarkets to get the cheapest vegetables. I did look at their life and I was like, did I make the wrong decision here? But, you know, death in the short term versus the long-term harvest. I mean, like, there's nothing like marriage and kids.
Seared into my memory. About 18 months ago, I was asked to address around 60 young emerging leaders, mostly university, some early stage career, exactly half boys, half girls, funnily enough, I remember counting, exactly the same. And somehow or other, we got into a discussion which got surprisingly animated, distressingly animated. The boys were saying, we don't know how to go about relationships anymore because we're just told all the time that we're toxic.
Yeah.
And so we've reached the point where we're not brave enough to try and form a relationship lest we're accused of some terrible behaviour. And the girls were saying, every time we go into a tutorial group or we listen to a lecturer, we're told, you know, whatever, particularly on campus, you know, take notice, people who run our campuses in Australia, this is what the young people are saying. All men are predators. Don't be taken in by men. They're bad. And somebody wryly down the back just commented in a stage whisper, pretty good for romance.
Yeah.
What do you say to young people who think we mightn't even know anymore there's a thing out there called romance? They want it. They instinctively feel it must be there. Our culture's done a pretty good job of killing it.
There are so many problems with dating culture today. And I travel across the United States and obviously overseas. And you and I are in the marriage and family space. I mean, well, I'm in the marriage and family space. You dabble in the marriage and family, in addition to all the other things that you talk about. But you're pretty aware of what's happening in the world of, you know, family formation, much more so than a lot of people, not just kind of the political conversations, but the coming population winter that we are facing.
Yeah. The depopulation bomb.
The depopulation bomb as a result
Aren't
of
there
that.
too many of us is yesterday's comment.
1980 called and they want their talking point back. But there's a problem with dating for the reasons that you mentioned. But there's so many other problems with dating right now. And I'll mention a few of them. And I'll say this to you, John, as somebody that just started a matchmaking service. So I travel all over and I meet these incredible people who, like you and me, they understand.
Thank you. That's a nice thing to say.
You and me and you. Like this, John. We understand the importance of marriage and family. We understand that it's an irreplaceable part of a thriving society. So I run into all of these wonderful young people. Maybe they're 20, maybe they're 25, maybe they're 35. And they want to get married and they want to have children. But the guys say, there's no girls. Like the girls are psycho, right? They have these high body counts or they're not interested in settling down. And the girls are like, there's no guys. They are all like superficial. Like if I don't dress like a porn star, then they're not interested. If I'm not a 10 on the app, I'm just going to get swiped through. And they're right. And then there's a problem even within the Christian dating world that I think that we so emphasize because we saw the dangers of the hookup culture in the 80s and the 90s and the early 2000s. We saw the casual sex. We saw the anonymous sex. And we said, okay, no more dating, courtship. You're not going to go on a date until you're ready to get married. Okay, and what that communicated is I should not ask a girl on a date. I should not accept going on a date. I shouldn't even start thinking about this unless I think that guy is marriage material. And so now that you've got teens, I would say, not teens, you've got young adults, some older teens, some in their 20s, who in the Christian world, guys won't even ask a girl if they want to go on a date unless they think, can I marry her? And girls won't say yes to a guy unless she thinks, would I marry him? And that is a problem because in that sense, they're already knocking tons of people out of the running rather than just saying, you seem like a nice guy. Sure. So like the way dating is a skill, dating well is a skill, and nobody is practicing.
I've never heard that expression before.
Nobody's practicing. You should go on a lot of dates, a lot of casual dates.
No, not
right?
for me.
You are not. Julie and I have already talked. Julie and I have decided no more casual dates for you, John. Okay, you're committed.
Absolutely.
Okay, no casual dates for you. Everybody else, single, go on lots of casual dates. Girls, if a guy is brave enough to say, do you want to go out for coffee? Do not plan your whole wedding in the middle of that coffee date. And don't say no to him if you can't see yourself walking down the aisle. Just say yes. And practice the skill of dating. Have a great conversation, learn about yourself, learn about him, reward his courage for asking you. And that should be mainstream. Bring back casual dating because you need practice and you need a lot of face-to-face contact. So here's the other thing. So dating apps have totally destroyed this. What dating apps do is they elevate the hotties, okay? The hottest girls and the hottest guys are going to get the most attention. And you've got 89% of people on the dating apps who are gems, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them are incredible. But they're not a 10, so they just get swiped through. When the reality is you need to be looking for worldview alignment and character, and you can't see that on an app. So you can do things like go to church, or you can go to a social event. The problem with that is that guys who are outgoing and funny tend to rise to the top in a big group situation. So you'll have quieter guys who are incredible quality guys that aren't even going to be on a girl's radar in a big event like that. So I just think there's so many things working against young people who want to date and form families and get married. So I've started this matchmaking service. Like caveat, I'm not working with people unless I personally know them or they come recommended by somebody I personally know. But if you're watching this and you think this is a good idea, I think that every church should have a matchmaker. I think it should be an older married woman, and I will send you my criteria, okay? You should have a matchmaking service at your church. I will give you the entire process because Katy cannot do all of this. We need to have, in my opinion, hundreds of matchmakers who are putting people together who have worldview alignment, good character, they come recommended, and they're willing to go on some dates with each other.
Tell me, we've had a great conversation. We shouldn't go on forever, much as we might like to. The Trump administration, dangerous thing to open up. It immediately splits people all over the place in very passionate ways. But one question that does occur to me, the flurry, the unbelievable activity of signing of executive orders and so forth. Has he done anything for families, the bedrock of society?
Okay, so not him specifically, but there are so many good people in his administration that understand this. So like the Secretary of Transportation, Duffy, they did have something where they said, we are going to prioritize resources to communities that have higher rates of parents with children. And so like, we're going to reward the communities. We're going to strengthen the communities where people are moving because they want to raise families there. I think that instead of Pride Month in June, they had something like celebration of biological reality month or biological sex month, or maybe it was family month that they had. Now, obviously, they don't define family as the traditional heterosexual married home, but that's a lot closer to the target than transgender men with prosthetic breasts jiggling themselves on the White House lawn, which is what happened in the Biden administration. I think that anytime you are closer to embracing the reality of male and female, which this administration absolutely has, it's always going to be a win for marriage and children. Like whenever you have an administration that is touching grass, then that is going to redound to the benefit of the natural family. So even though Trump clearly, I don't think is a social conservative, there are a lot of wonderful people in his administration who are. Case in point, he had a promise on the campaign trail to be the father of IVF, right? He kind of talked about how he wanted IVF to be free or more accessible or more affordable. And so he came out with an executive order probably about, it was in February. It was when we were at ARC. And here's my executive order on IVF. We want to make it more accessible and more affordable. I'm going to take, feedback from people in the space for 90 days. And then I'm going to come out with a way to implement making this executive order happen. Well, it's been more than 90 days and we haven't gotten anything yet. I suspect that's because there's people in his administration that are saying, this is not the way forward. This is the way to create homes where children are not going to have a mother and father. And it is not pro-life. IVF, destroys probably 97% of the little lives that are made in the Petri dish. So it's not a pro-life technology. And also it runs afoul of MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again. It does not resolve fertility issues, it circumvents fertility issues. It's not about healing the body, because so much of what people have to deal with in infertile situations are environmental or health related. And so it is in conflict with a lot of the other priorities of the Trump administration. So I don't know what's going to happen on the IVF issue, but the fact that nothing has come out of the administration yet saying the government's going to subsidize this tells me that there's a lot of people in his orbit that probably know what time it is when it comes to defending the family, and they're going to do it and seem to be doing it in a pretty diplomatic way.
Finally, one of the things that I can't help noticing, and it's there in the research, men and women are bifurcating. You see it politically. Mm-hmm. Women are moving to the left. Mm-hmm. Men are moving to the right, particularly young men.
Yes.
What's behind that? I suspect for a lot of young men, it's been the promulgation of the idea that they're toxic just because they're male. That's why so many of them see Jordan Peterson as an uncle figure. Mm-hmm. And recently, my wife and I, Julia and I, had dinner with some remarkable people who'd raised three remarkable young men. They are the sort of young men that any family would be deeply proud of. And over dinner, the mother just said, I'm so thankful to Jordan Peterson because he's told my boys they're not toxic just because they're daughters. He's told them to be responsible.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a very interesting comment. I actually told Jordan that, and I think it cheered him up no end. He doesn't know who I'm talking about. You don't either.
Right.
Interestingly, one of the boys there said, just a thoughtful question, would you have had a different perspective if you had a daughter, Mum? Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting one, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What's the female version of the Jordan Peterson saying to young men, go back to your room, pull your shoulders back, clean it up, and then go out and be a hero? Mm-hmm. What's the female version of that? Is there one?
Well, I think that there is. Let me go back and say, what is going on with the split between young men and young women? Because men, 30 and under, you are seeing a swing towards traditionalism, especially among young men, when it comes to embracing traditional gender roles, when it comes to rejecting pornography, when it comes to valuing the family. It's really incredible. But young women, especially in the United States, are moving more to the left. And what is the explanation for that? It's you become what you behold. Okay, so young men now have men that they can behold, who are responsible, who are masculine, who are cleaning up their room. Unfortunately, there's also some men that they are beholding who are absolute scoundrels and scumbags and should be run off the internet, in my opinion. Not in the sense of removing their free speech rights, but they should be challenged for the toxic ideas that they're spewing about women. Andrew Tate.
Sorry to interrupt you. I can't help making this observation.
Yeah.
I was asked to speak to a large group of parents and their sons a while ago. And someone sort of said, do you think Jordan Peterson's a good model? And I said, well, you contrast, would you like your son to accept his messages or would you like them to accept Andrew Tate's?
That's right. Yeah, men, and it's what you said earlier. Young men are going to follow somebody.
Yep.
I wish that it was their father. I wish that every young man had a father in the home who loved them, cared for them, protected them, pushed them towards greatness, was connected to them, encouraging them. And that was the man that every young man looked to and said, I don't need Jordan Peterson. I don't need Andrew Tate. I've got my dad. That actually is one of the reasons why God ensured that children always had a male and female parent, is because boys especially need that guy to look to and follow. And thankfully, even in the absence of having that in your home, there's now some good options for men to look to. And I would say, thankfully, a lot of the censorship regime has fallen. So now those voices, Ben Shapiro, you can find your flavor of masculinity, Douglas Wilson, if you want that kind of thing. There's all kinds of wonderful Christian theologian leaders that you can follow. There's lots of good men that men can pattern themselves after. And social media, I think, is a really big part of that. Media is a big part of that. Media,
and men we know, young men, go on social media to follow sport, economics and politics. Stark contrast. Young women in Australia are more likely than young men actually to go on to those sorts of platforms, but they're not looking at economics or politics or sport.
So that is the problem with young women.
Not saying that there are necessarily a problem with that, but one wonders. Their viewing habits, their listening habits, what they're drawing on, they're worlds apart.
They're worlds apart. So women are more susceptible to social contagion. Right? We have these incredible pro-social behaviors. We have this natural empathy. And unfortunately, that is exploited through social media. And so women are much more likely to take on and to champion whoever they perceive to be the underdog. And the left kind of traffics all of their bad ideas under the guise of protecting the underdog. I saw this picture. I'm not even super familiar with UK politicians, but it was this row of MPs who are all women who defended or tried to obstruct investigations into the Muslim rape gangs.
Really?
It was all women. Yeah, all female MPs.
How could they do that to working class girls in their own country?
How could they do that? It is because they have been conditioned to believe that they need to protect the underdog or the vulnerable, which they have been told are foreigners or foreign men. And it's so fascinating because Jordan Peterson, who was he on with? Joe Rogan, I think. And they were talking about women are wired to give, right? It is in us to nurture and to soothe and to comfort and take care of and fight anybody that would ever dare to threaten our infant. Women that don't have a baby to care for, they will find a baby to care for. But Jordan's like, not everything that cries is a baby. Sometimes things that cry are monsters.
Just to tease that out for a moment.
Yeah.
We're talking about abused English girls. And you're saying that these people, there's a lot of evidence for it in Britain, have favoured, let's be blunt about this, mainly Pakistani Islamic men who have behaved with a brutality that ought to have every woman in the country tearing the place down until there's a proper investigation and justice done on behalf of those marginalised and unfortunately vulnerable young British girls. Where's our moral compass gone? What is the matter with these people?
I think, though, that picture was so emblematic as to the massive worldview split between men and women. Because women are so much more easily captured by the ideals of progressivism that couch everything in empathy for the oppressed. And you need to take care of the people that are oppressed. They just call the wrong people oppressed. You're empathizing with the wrong group. You shouldn't be empathizing with the Pakistani men that are targeting and grooming young white women, very often with religious undertones to it. You should be protecting the girls themselves. So I just think that one of the reasons for the worldview split is young men and young women are following different people. That young men are being much more, thankfully, I would say, discipled and persuaded by men who are, in many cases, telling them to man up and be protectors and providers. And unfortunately, young women are following accounts or ideas that tell them that they need to empathize with people who very often are victimizers themselves.
Intelligent people ought to be able to think these things through a bit more clearly. I despair of the lack of clear, rational discussion and conclusion forming in Western culture. It's really destroying us. Mm-hmm. But Katy, you've been very generous, and I'm glad you've enjoyed your time in Australia, and I'm sure many people will be very interested in what we've been talking about. Mm-hmm. Well, there'll be those who will be angry too.
Well, that's true, but we need to be persuasive, be compelling, and for the people that are looking for something else, I would say we need a generation. I mean, you're already doing it. Jordan Peterson is already doing it. We need to give young people something else to behold, not because our lives are perfect, not because our marriages are perfect, not because we're perfect parents, even though I totally think you should have your kids on the podcast, but because they need to know that health and wholeness and sweetness and faithfulness is possible. And so I pray that your platform would be enlarged, because you are the kind of man that I think can give, especially young men, the right pathway forward. And I love all your guests, and I'm happy to be one of them.
That's incredibly kind of you. I would think that many young women particularly would be inspired. I know one, she texted me the other day. She said she was so thankful for helping her understand why she felt so strongly about her own children. Yeah. In an age when those around were saying you should be prioritising your career. It's not what she wanted.
No, go get those babies, honey.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.